Next thing to think about is the problem of incentives. Most of us respond powerfully to incentives. We do things because we've got an incentive to do it. To what extent do you, by raising taxes, destroy people's incentive to work? If you tax people too heavily, to what extent do they say, well, why should I be bothered then? I might as well take leisure. They can't tax my sitting beside the swimming pool doing nothing. And then the most productive members of society produce less output. Less output means we're less well off, and we're all poor. A generation ago in the UK, the top rate of tax, you had to be rich for this to be true, but the top rate of tax was 83%, 83 pence in the pound. Unless you earned a bit extra, not by working for it, but in what they called unearned income, dividends on shares and so on. Then there was a little extra tax of another 15 pence in the pound. So you're very well off, and the company you've got shares in sends you another pound, and the government says that that's 98 pence for us, but you can keep the other 2p all for yourself. And an incoming government said, this is madness. Who's going to put themselves out for that kind of amount? And in one budget, they wiped all the top rates of tax out. And the top rate of tax, even on a billionaire earning an extra pound, became only 40%. And those that believe in an even distribution of income are appalled, of course, that the rich are now getting richer. But the counter-argument was, if we don't do that, we're all poorer, because we've taken away people's incentives to produce goods and services. So the next thing to think through is the effect of incentives. Just very quickly, there's a guy who's famous in the economic literature called Art Laffer. And Art used to be an advisor to the president in the States, and he was asked once, would it be a good idea to raise taxes to increase government revenue? And the story goes that Art was in a cocktail bar at the time talking to him, and he took this paper napkin and drew a diagram which has become the stuff of legend in economics textbooks. And what he drew was, along here you put the tax rate from 0 to 100%, and up here you put the tax take, how much the government receives from it. And he said, if you have a 0 tax rate, the government clearly gets nothing. If you increase the tax rate, the government gets some revenue. But the disincentive effects are such that people work harder and produce less, and so the government gets less. And there comes a point where increasing the tax rate doesn't increase government income, and in fact, after a while, it decreases it. And of course, if you have 100% tax, nobody's got any incentive to do anything, and so the tax take falls to 0. Now, I don't think you can argue with that. There's nothing to argue about. It's got to be true. The thing you can argue about is, what's that point? Are we here? So if we increase the tax rate, we make the distribution of income more even, and the government gets some more revenue? Or are we here somewhere where we could actually get more government revenue, more output, by cutting the tax rate? So there's been a lot of discussion in the literature as to where we are on what's become known as the Laffer curve.